I like Dave Ramsey. I watch his show on YouTube frequently and think he gives sound advice. So I was a bit surprised to watch a show this week that dealt with Social Security disability and find that there were several important errors. And that's the topic of this week's video. Hello, I'm John Foster. I'm a medical doctor who does Social Security disability exams. I've done more than 1,500. And today I'm going to talk about Dave Ramsey's disability errors. As usual, everything I say reflects my own opinions based on my own experience and study, and not the opinions of the Social Security Administration or any other medical body. Now, the errors that were made are errors that I see patients commonly make, which is why I think this video would be helpful. In the description to this video below, I include a link to the video. You only need to watch the first 2 minutes, which are concerning the medical disability. The rest is financial advice, and I'm certainly not going to give any financial advice. I'm the last person you'd want to take financial advice from. So, what we have is a 40-year-old man who went into a lot of student loan debt to get an advanced degree. And at 27 years of age, he had an epileptic seizure and then had a second one a year later. And then we fast forward to 2020, when he presumably would have been 37 years old, when he had a second surgery which removed part of his brain and made him disabled, he says. So now would be a good time to watch the Dave Ramsey video, and as you watch it, try and think, what is the important information that's missing from this video, and what is the information that's wrong or erroneous? And then come back. Now, for my non-medical personnel viewers, I'm going to talk a little bit about epileptic seizures. Medical personnel can skip forward about 3 minutes. Epileptic seizures are a disorder of the brain. It's a vast subject. There's many different types of seizures, but the most common and the type for which most patients claim disability is called grand mal. In a grand mal seizure, the patient suddenly loses consciousness, often without warning. They stiffen up, usually fall down if they're in a standing or sitting position, and then after a brief period, they start shaking coarsely, like this. They're unconscious, and they often turn blue and may foam at the mouth. Some lose control of their bladder and pee their pants. The seizure will typically last for about 1 to 3 minutes. When the seizure ends, there's usually a period called the post-ictal period, where the patient is usually asleep or groggy, and they gradually return to normal over anywhere from maybe 5 minutes to an hour or 2. Now, the frequency of seizures is extremely variable. Some people have one in their lifetime and then never have another. Some people have them infrequently, and some unfortunate people have them very frequently, either several times per week or even several times per day. Most, but not all, seizures can be controlled with medication. The patient takes a medication every day, and that will prevent or significantly reduce the number of seizures they have. From time to time, people on medication will have seizures, and they're often brought to the emergency department. Most of those seizure medicines can be checked in the blood, and the emergency room doctor will do a blood seizure medication level, and it's often 0. Those seizure medicines tend to stick around for several days in the body, So if the level is 0, that means the patient hasn't been taking their seizure medicine for several days. That's more common than you might expect, and it's often due to the fact that most seizure medicines have some unpleasant side effects. Now, I did emergency medicine for 27 years, and I saw countless seizure patients, and I just want to give you a little advice on what to do if you see somebody having a seizure. And the advice is you probably don't need to do anything. A seizure to the untrained looks awful. It looks like the person's dying, but it's almost always a harmless occurrence unless the loss of consciousness causes a danger to the patient, like if they suddenly go unconscious and land with their hand on a hot stove, or if they're swimming in a pool and have a seizure and go under. In such a circumstance, you want to remove the danger as far as possible. Take the person's hand off the stove, lift their head above the water so they can breathe, and then just leave them be, call 911, and let the seizure run its course. There's a popular misconception that patients with seizures will swallow their tongue and choke to death, and so you have to prevent that, and that's just plain wrong. People will tell you to stick your finger in their mouth to prevent them swallowing the tongue. All that will result in is 2 patients, because now you have a seizure patient and a patient with a bitten finger. Or they'll tell you stick something in their mouth like a spoon. All that does is break the patient's teeth. Just make sure they're safe, leave them alone, and call 911. So the biggest error in the Dave Ramsey video that I saw is this man describes having had 2 seizures and 2 brain surgeries, and then jumps to the fact that he's disabled. But there's no mention of why he's disabled. It's simply assumed that because he's had 2 brain surgeries, he must be disabled. Remember, disability always means that you have medical problems that prevent you from performing work-related activities. Here's something that brain surgeons know. There are some parts of the brain that, as far as we know, do very little, and large amounts of those parts can be removed without any apparent harm or minimal harm to the patient. There are other parts of the brain where if you remove even an amount of tissue the size of a kidney bean, the patient will suffer devastating harm or even death. So 2 brain surgeries doesn't tell us if this man has lost his work-related abilities or not. From the call, we do know that he has the ability to speak, to think, and to remember. His mind appears intact. Now the next error is that it appears that he and Dave Ramsey are upset that, in his words, a retired gynecologist made the determination on his case. Well, there are 2 errors here. He had a consultative examination. The doctor who does a consultative examination, which is what I do, never makes the final decision in a Social Security disability claim. The consultative examination report is just one of many pieces of evidence the Social Security Administration uses to make a decision on a disability claim. The second is Social Security does not hire specialists depending on the patient's problems. You will get a generalist, a doctor who has experience with a wide range of medical conditions, and I'll give you an example why. I'm due to perform Social Security disability exams at the end of this week, and as an example, I'll give you one of the patients I'm going to see. They listed 10 different problems for which they're claiming disability. These problems include a mental health condition for which they need a psychiatrist, problems hearing and ringing in their ears for which they need an ear, nose, and throat specialist, breathing problems for which they need a pulmonologist, a lung specialist, problems with their spine and several joints for which they need an orthopedist, a bone and joint specialist, and migraines for which they need a neurologist, a brain and nervous system specialist. That's 5 different specialists for one patient. You are not going to get a doctor who's a specialist in the condition you're claiming disability for. Now, Social Security does approve claims for disability for some patients with epilepsy. Since this man is under age 50, he would have to meet the listing for epilepsy. I'm going to include a link in the description below to Social Security's listing of impairments. If you go there, first you'll see section 11.00, neurological disorders. That's disorders of the brain and nervous system. Click that, and at section 11.02, you'll find epilepsy. And Social Security gives a brief description of various types of epileptic seizures for which they'll consider a disability claim. There are several things they want to approve a claim. The first is a description of a seizure, and they prefer the description be by a medical person. Well, that's a bit difficult because seizures are sudden and unexpected, and it's rare that they occur in the doctor's office or hospital, although it does occur sometimes. When I see a seizure patient, I interview them, if possible, with a partner or spouse or family member who's witnessed their seizures and can describe them to me. The second is they want the blood epilepsy medicine level if it's available, and here's why. Social Security will not approve a disability claim for a person who's been prescribed a medicine that would control their seizures if they took it, but is having seizures because they are not taking their medicine. That's very important if you're filing disability for epilepsy. Where do they get the information that the person's not taking their medicine? Usually from emergency room records. Like I say, people will call 911 when somebody's having a seizure, the ambulance brings them in, and the emergency room doctor orders an blood epilepsy medicine level. If it comes back 0, that person's not taking their medicine. Social Security wants the results of an EEG, or electroencephalogram test, if available. That's a test of the electrical activity of the brain. It literally measures the brain waves that doctors use to help with the diagnosis and treatment of epilepsy, and it's pretty technical and not really something a patient needs to know the details of. Finally, they want to know the frequency or number of seizures. How many seizures is the patient having? How often? Now, just like the IRS won't tell you how much you can deduct before you'll get an audit, Social Security won't tell you how many seizures, how frequently you need to have in order to qualify for disability. But obviously, if you have a seizure once every 5 years, they're not going to approve it. If you have a seizure once every 1 or 2 days, they almost certainly will approve a disability claim. One more thing about the Dave Ramsey show, this person has gotten themselves in quite a bit of debt and now can't pay it because they're not working. Well, unfortunately, Social Security doesn't take into account your financial situation when you file a disability claim. You can be in a lot of debt, or you can have a lot of money saved up. It makes no difference to Social Security when you apply for disability. What does make a difference is if you're working, if your earnings are above a certain level, they won't approve you for disability, but you could have $1 million saved up and be unable to work due to medical problems, and they would give you disability benefits. Well, I hope this has been helpful, and as always, remember, if it happens, it's possible.